Welcome to the Weather Farm. We are diving right into this forecast because it is jam-packed. We are talking about severe weather for our Friday, a very dangerous situation across the south for our Saturday, heavy snow across the northern plains, and we are talking about extensive flooding for places like Kentucky and Tennessee that 4 weeks ago saw extensive flooding. We're going to dive right into the details. As we begin our Friday, we see that low pressure making its way into eastern Colorado. It is bringing snow through Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado down into New Mexico. Out west, we see another atmospheric river making its way onshore with heavy rain for the coast and snow for those higher levels. We are going to dive right into our temperatures. For our temperatures on our Friday, this is going to be a contributing factor for this particular system. 70s making their way into Minnesota. We have extensive warmth down to the 80s, mid 80s, all the way down to the Gulf. This part of the forecast has not changed since we last talked to you on Wednesday. Extreme heat is down across southern Texas. Out west, where the atmospheric river is making its way onshore, we see temperatures being held down into the 40s and 50s. But there is no sign of Arctic air anywhere in the United States on our Friday. So let's put this map into motion. As we begin, we see that system getting its act together. By the time we get to Friday afternoon, spreading rain into Missouri and Iowa, the snow is going to start flying across the Dakotas and Minnesota overnight on our Saturday. All that moves east, but we turn our attention Saturday to the south. And that is where we're going to spend a significant amount of time because we think this is a potentially dangerous situation. The other big story with this system is not only the severe weather, the heavy rain, but it is the winds. And we talked about this on Wednesday. We're going to see winds 50 to 60 miles per hour across the panhandle of Texas into Oklahoma, up towards Missouri, into Illinois and Indiana by the time we get to our Saturday. Across the northern plains, we're going to have blizzard conditions with that snow flying with winds 40 to 50 miles per hour. And it's one of the reasons that NOAA has gone ahead and they have issued and upgraded. If you remember, we talked on Wednesday about this. We now have an extreme fire outlook for dangerous fire conditions anywhere from central Texas through central Oklahoma into southeastern Kansas. Wichita, you're just outside of this extreme danger, but we have critical danger encompassing several states, and an elevated risk of fire danger is now making its way up through Iowa into the Ohio Valley, all the way up into Michigan and Ohio. We do have this area of ISO dry, and that is centered in eastern Kansas, western Missouri, and far northwestern Arkansas. There is some concern that we could have lightning strike in non-thunderstorm areas, so there'll be no rain with this particular system, but lightning could strike and ignite fires. So that is another concern that we are watching for our Friday. Behind the system, we're going to have extremely gusty winds, low relative humidities, and the fire danger is extreme. And this is something that has changed since our last video. We now have a moderate risk of severe weather from western Illinois to eastern Missouri up to southeastern Iowa into places like Paducah, maybe down towards Memphis, and we have an enhanced risk across the Ohio and Tennessee Valley. If we see severe weather, if we see tornadic thunderstorms for our Friday, it is likely going to be in this reddish shaded area. Can't say that it can't happen in that orangish shaded area as well, but the highest probability is going to be found here, and it's going to be in that 3 o'clock to 10 o'clock time period. And if we look at all the risk, so up here in the upper left, we see that categorical risk, and that's where we see that moderate risk for those areas. We go to the net panel on the right. This is our tornado outlook. We have a 10% chance of tornadoes forming anywhere in this yellow section. In the brownish section, a 5% chance, and then a 2% chance in that greenish outline. And again, the primary threat for tornadoes in the Ohio Valley is going to be between Friday at 3 p.m. to about 10 o'clock at night. Saturday, everything shifts to the south. We may see, even though we're in that 10% risk in Mississippi and Alabama, I think this is going to be a late night event because this map does carry us through to 8 a.m. on Saturday. So I do think there will be a overnight tornado risk across Mississippi and Alabama. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. If we go down to the lower left, we see hail is another big component of this, as well as the strong wind. So this is a potentially dangerous situation. If you do not have a way to get weather information, please stay tuned to your local meteorologist. Please stay tuned to your phone for any alerts that may pop up, and take shelter as needed. You should probably be talking about this now, that in the event something happens, what is your plan? So let's look at this all develop across the Ohio Valley on our Friday. So we start to see those storms starting to develop by about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We get a line coming through Missouri. That line intensifies. And the thing with this is, we are going to see this as a QLCS, a quasi-linear convective system. And the problem is, we could get embedded tornadoes in that QLCS. The thing that I don't think we're going to see that tornado risk go into Indiana is because we're going to see this other line of storms form ahead of the main line. That's going to help stabilize the atmosphere a little bit as this system moves through Indiana overnight Friday into Saturday morning. Up across the northern plains, we're going to see that snow flying, and the winds are going to be howling by the time we get to Saturday morning. It's going to bring significant snowfall to that area. So let's just go ahead and take a look at our map for that Saturday morning. We see that low pressure system has made its way from eastern Colorado into western Wisconsin as a 976 millibar low. The modeling does suggest it can get as low as a 974 millibar low. Remember, the all-time record for the month of March is 972. On the backside, across the eastern Dakotas into northwestern Minnesota, heavy snow. We're talking snow rates 1 to 2 inches per hour. Rain has moved through the Ohio Valley into Michigan, into Ohio, and then our attention is now turning to the south. We're already on Saturday morning. We are seeing storms starting to fire, and we're going to go into those details a little bit later in this video. But be prepared. This is going to be a long-lived event for our Saturday. And that's why on Saturday, we have not only a moderate risk, but they have gone ahead and upgraded a lot of Mississippi into Alabama with that higher risk of severe weather. Now, they will not issue the highest level of threats this far out, but I would imagine that by the time we get to Friday night, I would not be surprised if we see an even more concentrated area of extreme concern for severe weather on our Saturday across parts of Mississippi and into Alabama. But we can see even that moderate risk, that enhanced risk, stretches all the way up to Tennessee, over towards Atlanta, because this is all going to pivot through the southeast on our Saturday, making its way to the coast by the time we get to Sunday. We could even see severe weather up as far north as Ohio as we get back into the heating of the day. Indiana, I did say that you're going to kind of miss out because you're going to have that initial line move through that's going to help stabilize the atmosphere. And most of the energy that moves through Indiana and Michigan, that's going to be overnight when the conditions are just a little bit more stable in the atmosphere. But as we get into the heating of the day on our Saturday, and we are still pumping extreme amounts of warm air up from the Gulf into the Northeast. This is why Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, you need to be on the watch out as well for the possibility of an isolated severe storm. So let's take a look at this weather system as it makes its way through the southeast. Again, by the time we get to 5 o'clock on Friday night, we're starting to see some storms popping across Arkansas and Louisiana. This is not the main event. There'll be scattered showers as that moves through Mississippi into Alabama overnight Friday into Saturday. But by the time we get to about 1 or 2 a.m., we start to see some of these storms become a little more organized and they remain discrete individual supercells. So we could even have a period of tornadoes in Mississippi and Alabama overnight between 4 and 8 a.m. on our Saturday. That moves through Alabama and look back towards Louisiana and Mississippi. We see yet another round of storms starting to form. All of these super discrete individual cells. And that is why we are going to be concerned all day Saturday with the threat of tornadoes, heavy rainfall, potentially dangerous situations. And this is going to last into Saturday evening, and it's going to make its way through Georgia. This particular model, the HRRR, the high resolution model, it stops at 8 p.m. on Saturday, but we do expect those to continue through Georgia. This next map I'm going to show you is the significant tornado index. When we start to see those yellows, that's an indication of a value greater than 2. So we start to see the greatest risk of tornadoes across eastern Arkansas, northern Mississippi, overnight Friday into Saturday. But when we start to pick up on these yellows, these oranges, and even the reds across Louisiana into southern Mississippi and Alabama, this is where we have the greatest possibility of tornadic thunderstorms, long-lived tornadoes that are going to be very devastating and very powerful. The modeling would indicate that there is the strong possibility of that occurring across Mississippi and Alabama during the afternoon on Saturday. Please, if you don't have a plan, make a plan now for the event that something happens. The majority of you will not see a tornado, but those that are impacted or in the way, please have a way to get those notifications so you can stay weather aware for your Saturday. This is the Energy Helicity Index, and this is something we talked about on our Wednesday. And basically it takes the CAPE value and the storm relative helicity, multiplies those two values together, and gets a ratio. And when we start to see the oranges appear, that indicates an EHI greater than 2 and 3, which indicates that tornadoes and strong tornadoes are possible. When we start to get these reds popping up, that's an EHI of higher than 5. That means potentially devastating tornadoes are possible. And again, that's the key word. They are possible. With the last map and this map, all of this is predicated on the atmosphere playing out exactly as we anticipate it will. There are possibilities if we don't have the moisture flow, if there are other variables in the atmosphere, if we get the storms not to stay as discrete supercells, but instead if they congeal into a line, that will lower the tornado threat. But right now, we think that based on all the data, there is the likelihood of a tornado outbreak across Mississippi and Alabama for our Saturday. And we're going to continue to watch this over the weekend, and we will bring you new information as soon as we get this. So let's play at the radar. Again, this is Friday evening, so we see those discrete cells popping across the area. Nothing too terribly organized. As we go overnight Saturday, we start to see a line of discrete cells making their way through Hattiesburg up towards Tuscaloosa. That kind of moves out by the time we're waking up on our Saturday, but yet the storms continue to build. They continue to fire. New supercells are forming, and we're going to see that line make its way through Mississippi by late Saturday afternoon into Alabama by the time we get to Saturday evening. So this is one of the things I want to talk about. This is our map Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock Eastern, 2 p.m. Central Time. We see a line of storms stretching down from Tupelo down to Meridian, down to Hattiesburg, back towards Jackson, Mississippi. We see heavy rain across northern Alabama into northern Georgia and Tennessee. Nothing severe, though we could see isolated severe weather in those locations. The main area of concern is this line from Tupelo down to Hattiesburg. So we're going to look at the skew-T sounding from this storm that's just north of Meridian, Mississippi. And when we look at the skew-T analysis, we see, again, if you watched our video on Wednesday, if you've seen our short that we have on YouTube describing the capping and how we can determine that in the atmosphere, we see that red temperature line staying well to the left of the white dash line, all the way up above 12 kilometers in the atmosphere. This is going to allow the air parcels to rise and create those strong updrafts that are going to build those thunderstorms very tall, very powerful. And when we look at the CAPE values, we see those 2,000 surface, most unstable CAPE around 2,100. We come over here to the storm relative helicity, 359 from the surface up to 1 kilometer, 460, 500. We see the EHI. Again, EHI, that Energy Helicity Index, you simply take the surface CAPE of 1944, multiply it by the storm relative helicity of 359, divide all that by 160,000, and you get that ratio. That's 4.4. So when we see this value at 4.4, we have the likelihood of long-lived dangerous tornadoes being possible if this sounding is correct. When that value starts to get above 5, those are devastating. The one caution that I will have, and it's why I say that we have to be careful with this system, because there has to be a lot of things that come into play. You see this green line, that's the dew point line. It's to the right of the temperature line, which means that the dew point is higher than the actual temperature outside at that particular level of the atmosphere, which can't physically happen. We cannot have an atmosphere that's saturated greater than 100%. So we kind of have to ignore this middle part of the sounding, but we can kind of interpolate that from the points where it looks reasonable to the points above. But we do have to take this with a grain of salt. And a lot of this can happen because, again, when the balloons go up every 10 to 12 hours, they sample the data, and then we have to interpolate that in a model. And sometimes that interpolation gives us data that doesn't quite make sense. So we as meteorologists, we have to analyze these parts and say, okay, what's really happening here? Because this physically can't happen. But we see other signs in here, and we see this hodograph in the upper right. It's curving with height. And so that's why we believe, as this skew-T indicates, there could be a potentially dangerous situation of tornado near Meridian, Mississippi, in this line stretching down to Hattiesburg up towards Tupelo. And that's what we're going to be focused on. And we could have several tornadoes on the ground at once, and they could be long-lived tornadoes. So definitely something we will be watching on our Saturday. The other big thing that I mentioned, not only is the severe weather across the southeast, but we are going to have heavy amounts of rainfall, 1 to 2 inches from Mississippi all the way up to central Ohio, back towards Indianapolis. But we have a bullseye that includes the Nashville, Lexington, and Cincinnati areas, 2 to 5 inches of rain. And even as we get down here into southern Kentucky, northern Tennessee, just north of Nashville, we could be in the bullseye for 6 to 8 inches of rain. This is potentially devastating amounts of rainfall. Flash flooding will be likely. It will be dangerous. This is the same area that just 4 weeks ago had 6 to 8 inches of rain. Grounds are still very saturated from that storm. So the other part is the winter aspect of the storm. So we see this getting going by midnight on our Friday into Saturday, snow flying across the central Dakotas. As that low continues to move to the north and northeast, we see that rain changing over to snow, and it's going to be heavy in eastern Dakotas to western Minnesota throughout the day on Saturday before it eventually pulls off to the northeast by the time we get to Saturday night. But when it's all said and done, we could see widespread 8 to 12 inches of snow across western Minnesota, far northeastern South Dakota into Ontario. We could even see a pocket of isolated amounts exceeding 12 inches of snow. It's going to be a narrow band of snowfall, not the widespread snowfall that maybe we thought earlier in the week, because a lot of that energy is going to be kept down in the south with the severe weather, but still significant snowfall for March. And by the time we get to our Sunday, that system continues to move eastward across the south, bringing heavy rain. Not so much intense thunderstorms by the time we wake up on our Sunday, but out west, we continue to watch the atmospheric rivers making their way on shore. And we're going to not focus so much on that area right now, because we do want to bring you the most current information about these severe weathers, but we will keep an eye on the West Coast. For our Sunday, the Storm Prediction Center has issued just a marginal risk of severe weather from Pennsylvania down through Florida. Again, we don't expect the widespread tornadic thunderstorms that we will see on our Saturday across the south, but an isolated tornado or two cannot be ruled out for our Sunday. By the time we get to Monday morning, that system's completely moved offshore, taking with it that heavy rain. And as I mentioned, we are now turning our attention back to the West Coast, where that system has made its way into Idaho and Montana, bringing amount of snow to those higher elevations. And by the time we get to Tuesday, we see yet another system organizing itself into eastern Colorado, and it's spreading snow across Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. And it is that system that is going to give us the next chance of significant snow across the northern plains and severe weather through the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. Still 5 days away. A lot will change with this particular forecast, so we will give you the details as soon as they become available. We hope you've enjoyed this weather forecast. Please stay safe. We may go live over the weekend. If you want to be notified, click that bell icon, click the subscribe button so you are notified each time we put out new information. Also, check us out on Facebook at The Weather Farm for the latest information, as we will post information there as well over this upcoming weekend. Stay safe, and we will talk to you real soon.